Assalamu alaikum. Good morning. Today is the 3rd of Shaban and the birthday of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, the grandson of the Prophet. The month of Shaban is the month of the Prophet. It is a month in which there are a lot of birthdays from the household of the Prophet, and it's a specially special month for the daughter of the Prophet, Syeda Fatima Zehra sallallahu alaihi. Her daughter was born on the 1st. Her son Imam Hussein was born. His grandsons were born. Her grandsons were born. And then the 12th Imam, the awaited Savior, was born on the 15th of Shaban. So special month. So with regards to the special month, I would like to focus on some aspects of the life of Syeda Fatima Zehra. I know it is not the month of Jamadi Sunni, which is dedicated for Syeda Fatima Zehra because her death, her martyrdom, and the birth is in that month. But it is a month which has significant impact on the life of Syeda Fatima Zehra. So and that's why I want to focus on her life, especially in 2021. We know there has been a lot of discussion, and I've been processing a lot of this discussion and want to bring a lot of this together. So the life of Syeda Fatima Zehra is revered by both Sunnis and Shias. It's not even a question. She is one of the most revered personalities of Islam. For Shias and Sunnis, for Muslims, she is the Lady of Heaven. She is the leader of the ladies of the world. So she is the role model for all the Muslims, for the entire humanity. And one cannot talk enough about her blessings and her achievements. But one thing that has been of a lot of discussion, especially in 2021, is about the circumstances around her death. Was she martyred, or did she die of natural causes? Was her house burned, or all of that is a myth? Was there some persecution that happened against her by the people in power at that time? So, for example, by the caliph of the time, or by the people of highest post at the time, especially after the death of the Prophet. What happened? And in that regard, the discussion was spurred. I mean, it's not a question of the discussion was spurred. It has been an ongoing discussion for 1400 years. It has not been at the level that it was spurred in 2021 and end of 2020 because of the trailer of the movie Lady of Heaven. But this discussion is ongoing. It's mentioned in books, in both Sunnah and Shia books. It's mentioned in text, in speeches, in audio, and other form of mediums of communication that something happened, something really bad happened to Syeda Fatima Zehra salawatullah alaiha. And a few years ago, there's a prominent Muslim cleric, Tahirul Qadri. He said, nothing happened to Syeda Fatima Zehra. And I'm very intrigued by the fact that up till that point, he was very prominent in Pakistani politics. Suddenly he was very prominent. After making that claim, his prominence has gone down the drain. Similarly, Zakir Naik, he had hundreds of thousands of followers coming to his lectures, and he was preaching, converting people in public. Till one day when he said the fight in Karbala was between two princes, Hussein and Yazid. So we cannot say who was right. And since then, honestly, it's mind-boggling. It's confounding to me how things changed. Since then, he had to leave his country. He's on the run. He's in Malaysia. He's not in India. All of his following, everything is done. I mean, he does his YouTube and other things, but the following that he had in India, when he had like hundreds of thousands of people coming and listening to his lectures and being converted to Islam, all of that ended up like in a snap once he made that claim. So it's just confounding how things happen when people go against, especially like people who are very prominent and are on the verge of success, and suddenly they make a claim against the Ahl Bayt al-Islam and suddenly everything disappears. It's something that we should think of as Muslims, as humans. Why does this happen? So what has happened over the past few years is because of internet, a lot of this literature which was hidden, which wasn't publicly available, came to the forefront. As a result, a lot of Sunni ulama, because Sunnah people, they had no idea that this was even mentioned. There was nothing. It was not mentioned. No one even knows, even today, that this has happened. But what happened with the internet, people started finding out about these things. People started asking questions. And as a result, a lot of Sunni ulama or so-called scholars, they started preempting these discussions by negating the entire concept. So a couple of years ago, Maulana Shahnshah Hussain Naqvi of Pakistan, he recorded a video with examples and with narrations from the Sunnah book about this event. And books, not just one book, like books, Sunnah books, Tariq al-Tabri and other, say Muslim and others. Recently, there was the trailer, not the entire movie, Lady of Heaven, which came out and which stirred the conversation again. And there was a big divide in terms of how to react to this movie and the integrity of this movie. And the divide was between both Shias and Sunnah. Recently, like a few weeks ago, Sayyid Mudarrisi has come out with a documentary of the events that led up to the burning of the house of Syeda Fatima Zehra. And so it's a very interesting, very comprehensive documentary, 1 hour long. One should watch it in detail to understand what happened. So as I mentioned, there are two dimensions. One is people who are Shia. They have a disagreement, not a disagreement on the actual events, but disagreement on whether it should be shared in public or not. And then the second is Sunnah, who are literally saying it never happened. So, and their mindset is totally in a very different realism. It's a very different dimension. So I will talk about the Sunnah aspect first, because over the past 3 months, since December, I've been having a lot of conversations via Twitter, via WhatsApp, with Shias and Sunnah and scholars, and I want to share that perspective with you. Next time, I'll talk about the differences of opinion within the Shias. And the goal is that over the next few series, or this series of audio conversation and podcasts, I would like to discuss some of the logical aspects of the event. And at the same time, I'll work with Dr. Hatim to bring in another aspect, which is like not only thinking about the events that happened after the death of the Prophet, but thinking about the events that led to the actual death of Syeda Fatima Zehra, not just after the death of the Prophet, but before the death of the Prophet, and what were the circumstances, how things were unfolding. So in order to understand all of that, I think it is imperative for us to understand what is the mindset like among the Muslims. So as I mentioned, there's one group of people. I would say there are like two major groups of people, Muslim people. And when I say Muslims, I mean Sunni Muslims over here, not Shia Muslims. One group is that which doesn't know what happened, because this is not discussed, this is not talked about, this is an area which is gray area. People don't want to talk about it, especially the scholars. They want to keep it hidden. And then there is the second group which has started preempting to negate a lot of these events, to say that this never happened, to create doubt. And they're not doing it right now. They're basically building on what started hundreds and 1400 years ago, so that people are confused. And once people are confused, they move into the other camp. Don't talk about it. We don't know enough. So let's think about that camp which is trying to muddy the water, which is trying to negate the evidence, which has a certain mindset. And I'll go through some of the literal examples of their discussion, how they approach this discussion. Many of you who have been to YouTube channels or Twitter channels, you know how this unfolds. But for the masses, but for the people, for the normal Shia who do not go to these YouTube channels, who are just focused on their own milad or majalis or going to their centers, now doing YouTube du'as and everything, they have no idea what's happening in the world. This is a recap, not a recap, but this is just an eye-opening example for what is happening. So first of all, the biggest argument is that event never happened. And any hadith that says this happened is a zaif hadith, so we cannot accept it. Whether it is from the books of Shia, like for example, Sulaim bin Qais, the book of Sulaim bin Qais, Sunni brothers argue that book was narrated by Aban, and Aban is considered a liar, so we cannot accept it. On the other hand, when you bring in like Sunni sources, like Tariq al-Tabri and others, they say, no, that did not happen, or this is Zaif Hadith. So the easiest thing to argue about, easiest things to say that it didn't happen is like call it Zaif Hadith and like just go along with your life. And then when you ask someone, why did Hazrat Fatima Zehra die within like 75 days, 90 days, 45 days of the death of the Prophet? She was in her prime, 18 years, 29 years, whatever narration you want to believe in. She was at the prime of her life. She had 4 small children. Why did she die? Like, oh, people die all the time. People die of malaria, or people die of flu. Anything could have happened. This was old time, so we don't know the records. She was crying a lot. Are you serious? Are you serious, man? So they don't have that argument. Like there's no logical argument. That's the part that I'll be building up to, the logical argument of this entire, like, one can say any narration is weak and then just don't talk about it. But then there is another aspect of logic, building together these events and understanding how everything comes together. And that logic we'll talk about as this series goes on. So then the next question is, okay, so if that happened, then why did Ali ibn Abi Talib name his children over the names of Caliph? And then they were like, there's no proof that the door was burned or Umar was involved. And then there is an argument, okay, bring a Sahih Hadith that proves that Umar was involved categorically. And then they also bring a hadith. So up to this time, now you see like there is no hadith, which is right. There is only zaif hadiths. And if you want to implicate Umar, bring a Sahih hadith which they believe is Sahih to implicate Umar, or to prove that the door was burned. Then they go into this chain of arguments to negate the Shia philosophy, the Shia way of thinking. For example, when one brings up the hadiths that Hazrat Fatima Zehra was upset by Umar and Abu Bakr, and she was buried at night, which is the being upset is part of Bukhari, and she did not talk to them, and no one was allowed to come to the funeral. Their answer is, oh, the upset, the hadith, and then when you narrate it, link it back to the Prophet saying whoever angered Fatima angered me, and whoever angered me angered Allah. They come up with a new logic. And honestly, this is not me talking about, this is all my Twitter discussion with Sunnis who have given me more insights. So they come up with this weird logic that, it is this hadith that whoever angers me, whoever angers Fatima angers me, is regarding Imam Ali alayhi salam. And because he was hurting Syeda Fatima Zehra by planning to marry Abu Jahl's daughter. So think about this. Now they're going into this different dimension. And then the next question comes, how can Abu Bakr and Umar be wrong if they were the first companions of the Prophet? They cannot be wrong. Well, the argument that Shaitan, Iblis, was the highest in worship till he showed arrogance and did not accept the orders of Allah, was thrown down from heaven to the ditches after all of his worship, kind of fits over here. You do everything that you claim, but if you did not accept what Allah ordered, there is a precedence. All of your amal can be taken away, and you can be worst of worst. So then they go into, they're like, Shias always curse Sahaba. Well, we don't curse Sahaba. We just highlight who was wrong. And then they're like, Shias have 2 Qurans. And even bring some weird evidence for that, like speeches and other things. When you ask them, can you bring a second Quran from any part in the world? They cannot. They can bring some clips of people saying something, but they cannot bring another Quran because there is no other Quran. Whether in Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Indonesia, America, Canada, England, Germany, Brazil, there's only one Quran. Then they will go into, but what about Mustafa Fatima? You believe that is Quran? No, we don't believe that is Quran, man. That is a different book. And when you give this argument to them, that is a different book about what happened, what will be happening till the day of judgment, which was given to Syeda Fatima Zehra by Angel Jibreel. They're like, how can Angel Jibreel come to a non-prophet? Well, hello. Have you not heard about angel coming to Hazrat Maryam? Or Allah Ta'ala giving wahi or ilham to the mother of Hazrat Prophet Moses? Then they bring up the question, Shias have innovated for years and they are the best in innovation. Well, again, hello. Who changed the azan? Who added as-salatu khairun min an-nawm? Who made Taraweeh obligatory? Who selected Abu Bakr as Khalifa? Who was the first person to give bay'ah to Abu Bakr? Who changed the location of Maqam Ibrahim? This was all done by In reply to this, there is no answer except for going roundabout into circulating type of arguments. And then they will say, oh, by the way, there wasn't a single person who selected Abu Bakr at first. It was the ijma of the Muslimin. Well, again, for your information, my dear brothers, it was not, and this is an answer that I've given, but basically, to recap what I've written is, it was not the ijma of the Muslimin. Ali alayhi salam and several companions were busy with the funeral of the Prophet, while some were gathered at Saqifa. So now, Imam Ali never gave bay'ah to Abu Bakr in the first place, and that's why the house of Syeda Fatima was burned, because they wanted to get the bay'ah. And then their argument goes in a very weird direction. The question they argue is, oh, so are you saying that Imam Ali was a coward? That he let the house of his wife, the daughter of the Prophet, burn down and then gave bay'ah to all the caliphs? And at that point, one has to remind them, which I did reminded them, have you seen the picture of Muhammad bin Salman shaking hands with the son of Khashoggi? That's what tyrants do. Tyrants don't care. Tyrants don't care about anything. Imam Ali not standing, he was protecting the progeny of the Prophet. If a person could kill and burn the house of the daughter of the Prophet, they could do anything. And that's what tyrants do. That's what they do to secure power. And then there is another argument that if Imam Ali would have fought and by fighting, if he would have died, all the Sunnis would not be ignorant. Well, there is another very interesting aspect to this. An answer to that question is basically, what did Harun did after Moses went to the mountain? Did he fight? Or did he keep quiet for the sake of the nation of Banu Israel? And at that point, Prophet had already told Imam Ali, you are like Harun to me, except for there won't be any prophet after me. And at that point, Imam Ali did what Harun did. When the golden calf was implanted, was loved by the people, he kept quiet. And at that point, the answer is, oh yes, but you cannot read Arabic, so leave the thread, don't talk to me. And then the other question that came up was, you talk about Taraweeh or changing azan, but then you should talk about the 12 imams which are not mentioned in the Quran. Again, the reply to that question is very simple. When you highlight that the 12 imams are not mentioned in the Quran, they are mentioned in hadith, in the hadith of Saqalain, which is mentioned in Sahih Muslim. And the details of this narration is very similar to the details of namaz and salat. So basically, salat is mentioned in Quran, or Hajj is mentioned in Quran, but the details of salat or Hajj or fasting is not mentioned in Quran. It is by the action and the hadith and the sunnah of the Prophet. That's where you get that information. That's how the aspect of Imam is mentioned in Quran. It's in Surah Yasin and many other places. But the details of Imamat, who are the 12 Imams, whose progeny they're going to come from, they're not in Quran. Similar to Salah, the details are mentioned by the Holy Prophet. The word Imam is mentioned on 6 occasions in Quran. It is mentioned in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 124. It is mentioned in Surah Al-Isra, verse 71. It is mentioned in Surah Al-Anbiya, verse 73. It is mentioned in Surah Al-Qasas, verse 5. It is mentioned again in Surah Al-Qasas, chapter 28, verse 41. Again in Surah Al-Sajdah, verse 24. So then the argument went into, okay, you talk about 12 Imams, but your hypocrisy is very apparent when you focus a lot on Imam Hussain alayhi salam and ignore Imam Hassan. Dear brother, that is absolutely not true. That is not the case. Imam Hassan alayhi salam commands amazing level. He was the first grandchild born to Rasulullah, first Sayyid. It's not even possible like what you are comprehending, that we don't give the regard to Imam Hassan alayhi salam. And then it goes into another chain of thought. It just keeps on getting weirder and weirder as you go into these rabbit holes talking to Sunnis, which kind of tells you a certain mindset that is at play. And this chain of thought is around Muawiyah. Muawiyah being the uncle of Prophet. When one argues who was right or wrong between Muawiyah and Imam Ali, irrespective who's Shia, who was the rightful caliph at that time, the answer is clitters, crickets, quiet. And then they ask, oh, so didn't Usman deserve justice? Oh, brother, we just asked you who was right between Imam Ali and Muawiyah. Imam Ali was the chosen, selected, elected caliph of the Muslimin. Muawiyah was a renegade. And then, if you go back to the hadith of Prophet had already told whoever kills, or Ammar bin Yasir was told by the Prophet that you will be killed by the transgressors. And he was killed by the army of Muawiyah during Siffin. So basically, according to Prophet's hadith, Muawiyah was the transgressor. So now the answer for this question is basically, it was a mistake based on ijtihad, but you cannot condemn someone. Are you kidding me? This person who's transgressing against the Imam of the Shias, the Wasi of the Prophets, the selected Caliph of the Muslimin, he kills an elevated Sahabi of the Prophet who was told that you will be martyred at the hands of the transgressors. And you're saying that this person is doing all these mistakes, this Muawiyah is doing all these mistakes because of his ijtihadi. These are all his ijtihadi mistakes and you cannot do these mistakes. And they go to the next level. They say Muawiyah is the best uncle of the Prophet. And he was a political genius. And he is famous for his hilm and generosity. Give me a freaking break, man, over here. In one of the tweets, one person at the end said, one person asked, I pray that I am assembled with Muawiyah in Jannah. So, it was a long synopsis of a lot of discussions that I had with Sunni brothers in January. And the purpose was not to walk you through all of these, but to give you a flavor of where the thought process is going. And just to recap, see the progression of the logical progression and infer for yourself where this mindset is. First, it starts with Saqifa, that nothing happened over there, all the Muslims accepted, which is false. Second, it goes to the house of the daughter of the Prophet Syeda Fatima Zehra. Nothing happened, weak narrations, how is that possible? Again, false. Third, calling out Imam Ali alayhi salam as coward, while ignoring what Prophet had said to Imam Ali. And adding narrations against Imam Ali which were said for others. Like Syeda Fatima was angry with Imam Ali. And that's when this narration was revealed. That whoever angers Fatima angers the Prophet. Fourth, calling other innovations or embracing innovation by the second and first and all the caliphs, but calling others out on innovation, which Shias don't innovate, but saying Shias innovate while they embrace innovation. Fifth, raising questions on Shias while loving Muawiyah to the point of entering Jannah with him. All of this points to one conclusion. And this conclusion is one which I'll let Dr. Hatim talk about in one of the future discussions. But I think something happened. Something happened after the death of the Prophet. It's like when Prophet Musa left Banu Israel, something triggered, and their love for that golden calf was installed in their hearts. No matter what they did, they could not get rid of that love. And similarly, something happened after the Prophet's death, whether it was the darkness of the heart, impurity in the heart, that the love of these golden calves were embedded in the hearts. So at this point, if that is the case, that love has persisted for 1400 years, and no one can get rid of that. What Allah installs, no one can get rid of that. However, our responsibility is to share the state of affairs, to share the logic. Even if no one wants to agree, to understand, or to listen to the logic or the historical facts, there's always this concept of logic. And we should bring out the logical arguments, not for the sake of changing someone's perspective, but for the purposes of making sure that whoever dies on Basira. What Allah did after the Battle of Badr, whoever died after that died on Basira. He saw what is possible by the power of Allah. And whoever lives with Basira. So if they listen to the arguments, they listen to the historical facts, they listen to the logical arguments, and still don't agree to, it's their responsibility. They won't be able to stand in front of Allah and say, oh, we did not know about it. With that, I'll conclude this part, which was based on the discussions with Sunni brothers on the topic of the burning of the house of Syeda Fatima Zehra and highlighting their counter arguments which go beyond the burning of the house and go all around so many different aspects which they cannot defend. There's another aspect I'll talk in the next discussion, which is about our internal aspects. And sometimes we disagree on things, not on the facts, but the way that things are conveyed. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.